A helpless little girl is thrown out into a raging storm by the woman who promised to care for her. Soaking wet, clutching her teddy bear, she whispers, "I'll be good, please," as the door slams in her face. But just when all hope seems lost, headlights cut through the darkness. Her father, a wealthy businessman, has come home early. He thinks he knows the truth about his family, but what he sees that night shatters everything. Behind the walls of his mansion, lies, jealousy, and betrayal run deeper than anyone dares to admit. The woman he trusted has been hiding a chilling secret, and the daughter he loves has been silently crying out for rescue. As love and cruelty collide, the question remains, will a father's return be enough to save his child? Or has the storm already done its damage? Thunder crashed against the darkening sky, rattling the windows of the sprawling countryside mansion. Inside the warm kitchen, 7-year-old Beatrice hunched over her notebook at the heavy wooden table, her small hand carefully guiding colored pencils across the paper. Her drawings were filled with hearts and sunshine, a stark contrast to the storm brewing both outside and within the house. "Must you always be so messy with your scribbles?" Loretta's sharp voice cut through the patter of rain. She stood by the marble counter, her perfectly manicured nails drumming an irritated rhythm. "And why are you so quiet? Normal children make noise." Beatrice's shoulders curved inward, trying to make herself smaller. Her pink cardigan hung loose on her thin frame as she whispered, "Sorry, stepmother." She carefully adjusted her colored pencils into a neater row, but her hands trembled slightly. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the kitchen's polished surfaces. The kitchen, despite its expensive appliances and designer touches, felt cold and unwelcoming under Loretta's reign. She moved around the space like a hawk circling its prey, her silk blouse rustling with each precise movement. "Dinner time," Loretta announced curtly, placing a plate of plain chicken and vegetables before Beatrice. "Try not to make a mess for once." Beatrice nodded, carefully picking up her fork. Her feet, which couldn't quite reach the floor from the tall kitchen chair, swung nervously beneath the table. The storm grew louder, and she flinched at each thunderclap, thinking of her father away on his business trip. As Beatrice reached for her glass of milk, her small fingers trembled. A single drop spilled onto the pristine tablecloth, spreading into a tiny white circle. Loretta's eyes flashed. "You clumsy, careless child!" She snatched up the cloth napkin, dabbing at the spot with exaggerated force. "This is Italian linen. Do you have any idea how much this costs? Of course you don't. You don't appreciate anything." "I'm sorry," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I'll clean it up." "Sorry doesn't fix anything," Loretta snapped, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. "Just like sorry doesn't fix the fact that you simply don't belong here. Look at you, can't even drink properly. What would your father's business associates think if they saw such a disgrace at his table?" Tears welled in Beatrice's deep brown eyes, but she blinked them back. Her small fingers clutched her teddy bear, a worn, loved thing that had seen better days, closer to her chest beneath the table. The storm reached its peak, rain lashing against the windows like angry fists. Loretta's face hardened as she watched Beatrice shrink further into herself. Something cruel and calculated flickered in her eyes. "Perhaps you need a lesson in appreciation," Loretta said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She grabbed Beatrice's arm, her grip firm enough to hurt. "Let's see how you like being where you truly belong, outside with the rest of the mess." "Please," Beatrice whimpered, but Loretta was already dragging her toward the heavy oak door. The little girl's sock-covered feet stumbled across the polished floor. Her teddy bear clutched desperately in her free hand. With a swift movement, Loretta yanked open the door. The storm roared into the house, wind whipping their hair and rain spattering across the threshold. Without hesitation, She pushed Beatrice out onto the wet doorstep. "Stepmother, please," Beatrice pleaded, her voice breaking. "I'll be good, I promise." But her words were cut off by the decisive slam of the door. The sound echoed with terrible finality, leaving Beatrice alone in the raging storm. Rain immediately soaked through her thin cardigan and leggings, plastering her dark hair to her face. She huddled against the door, making herself as small as possible, her teddy bear pressed protectively against her chest. "I'll be good, please," she whispered again, though there was no one to hear her words above the howling wind. Raindrops mixed with tears on her cheeks as she curled up on the cold doorstep, shivering in the darkness of the storm. Inside, Loretta turned up the volume on the kitchen radio, drowning out any sound of crying that might drift through the door. She resumed her evening routine as if nothing had happened, while outside, a little girl clutched her teddy bear and waited in the rain, hoping for mercy that wouldn't come from behind that locked door. The rain hammered against Beatrice's small body as she huddled against the front door, her teddy bear's fur now heavy and dripping. Her cardigan clung to her skin, offering no warmth against the biting wind. Through her tears and the sheets of rain, a sudden flash of light cut across the circular driveway, sweeping over the manicured hedges and illuminating her trembling form. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the house, its wipers working furiously against the downpour. The engine cut off, and through the curtain of rain, a car door opened. Beatrice blinked, water streaming down her face, as a tall figure emerged. "Beatrice?" Her father's voice carried over the storm, filled with disbelief and growing alarm. "Oh my God, Beatrice!" Desmond's polished shoes splashed through puddles as he ran toward her, his business suit getting soaked in seconds. His face, usually composed from years of board meetings and business deals, crumpled with shock when he reached the doorstep. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands gentle as they touched her ice-cold cheeks. "You're freezing!" Beatrice couldn't speak through her chattering teeth, but her small arms reached for him instinctively. Desmond scooped her up immediately, cradling her against his chest. Her teddy bear dangled from her grip, dripping onto the stone steps. "Hold on, baby," he murmured, fumbling with his keys. "Let's get you inside." The front door swung open, spilling warm light onto the wet doorstep. Desmond carried Beatrice into the foyer, water pooling beneath their feet on the marble floor. The sound of clicking heels announced Loretta's arrival from the kitchen. "Desmond!" Loretta's perfectly painted lips formed an O of surprise. "You're home early." "Oh dear, Beatrice, what have you done now?" Her voice dripped with false concern as she hurried forward, her silk blouse rustling. "She had such a terrible tantrum, darling. Ran straight out into the storm before I could stop her." Beatrice trembled harder in her father's arms, pressing her face into his wet suit jacket. Her small fingers clutched the fabric desperately. She ran out?" Desmond's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made Loretta's smile falter slightly. "In this weather?" "You know how children can be," Loretta said smoothly, reaching to touch Beatrice's hair. The little girl flinched away. "I was just about to go look for her. She's been so difficult lately, throwing fits over the smallest things. I've been trying my best, but—" "Beatrice," Desmond interrupted, his tone gentler as he addressed his daughter. "Can you tell me what happened?" The little girl lifted her head slightly, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks. She started, but her voice cracked. She glanced at Loretta, whose perfectly lined eyes had narrowed almost imperceptibly, and the words died in her throat. "She's probably too cold to talk properly," Loretta interjected quickly. "Why don't I run her a bath while you change out of those wet clothes, darling? You must be exhausted from your trip." But Desmond was already heading for the stairs, still carrying Beatrice. "I'll take care of her," he said firmly. "Could you bring up some hot tea instead, Loretta?" In Beatrice's room, Desmond helped her change into warm pajamas decorated with little stars. He wrapped her in thick blankets, creating a cocoon of warmth on her bed. Her teddy bear, after a quick spin in the dryer, sat beside her pillow, somewhat fluffier than before. "Here's your tea, sweetie." Loretta appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming mug. Her smile was fixed in place as she set it on the bedside table. "I added extra honey, just how you like it." Beatrice didn't reach for the tea. She huddled deeper into her blankets, watching Loretta with wide eyes. "Thank you, Loretta," Desmond said, sitting on the edge of Beatrice's bed. "I'll stay with her for a while." After Loretta left, Desmond stroked Beatrice's damp hair back from her forehead. "Feeling warmer now?" When she nodded, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Try to get some sleep, sweetheart. We'll talk more in the morning." As he stood to leave, his eye caught something in the wastebasket near her desk, the corner of a familiar notebook peeking out from under crumpled papers. He paused, frowning slightly, but didn't retrieve it. Instead, he adjusted Beatrice's blankets one more time and switched on her star-shaped nightlight. "I love you, Daddy," Beatrice whispered as he reached the door. "I love you too, Princess," he replied softly. "Sleep tight." Outside her window, the storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the glass. Thunder rolled in the distance, but inside her warm blanket cocoon, Beatrice finally stopped shivering. Her eyes grew heavy as she listened to her father's footsteps moving down the hallway, the sound reassuring her that she wasn't alone anymore. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm squares on the hardwood floor. The familiar scent of butter and vanilla filled the air as Desmond stood at the stove, expertly flipping a golden-brown pancake. He hadn't made breakfast like this in months, but his hands remembered the motions perfectly. Beatrice sat at the kitchen island, her feet dangling from the tall stool. Her eyes followed every movement her father made, as if afraid he might disappear if she looked away. Her hair was still slightly damp from her morning bath, curling softly around her face. "Here you go, Princess," Desmond said, sliding a perfect pancake onto her plate. He'd arranged fresh strawberries in a smile, with whipped cream for hair, just the way she used to love it. "Your favorite breakfast." A small smile tugged at Beatrice's lips as she picked up her fork. "Thank you, Daddy." Desmond watched as she took tiny, careful bites. She was so different from the bubbly child who used to giggle and make faces with whipped cream. Now she ate with such precise movements, as if afraid of making even the smallest mess. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you have to go away again?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Desmond set down his spatula and moved around the island to kneel beside her stool. "Not for a while, sweetheart. I promise." Beatrice's small arms wrapped around his neck, holding tight. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "Please, don't leave," she whispered into his shoulder. Before Desmond could respond, the click of heels announced Loretta's arrival. She swept into the kitchen wearing a cream-colored dress, her makeup already perfect despite the early hour. "Darling, could I speak with you for a moment?" Loretta's voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were sharp as they landed on Beatrice. "In private?" Desmond felt Beatrice's arms tighten around his neck for a second before she slowly let go. "Finish your breakfast, Princess," he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I'll be right back." In his home office, Loretta closed the door with a soft click. Her perfectly manicured fingers twisted together as she turned to face him. "Desmond, we need to talk about Beatrice." "About last night," he began, but Loretta cut him off. "It's not just last night," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been trying to handle it on my own, to spare you the worry while you're working so hard, but—" She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "The tantrums are getting worse. She becomes violent sometimes, throwing things, breaking her toys. Yesterday, she attacked me with scissors when I tried to help her with her homework." Desmond frowned, thinking of his gentle daughter carefully eating her pancakes. Scissors? That doesn't sound like Beatrice. Of course it doesn't sound like her. She's clever about hiding it from you. Loretta moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. I've been documenting everything, trying to get her help. I've even spoken to a child psychologist. They think she might need special attention. Doubt crept into Desmond's mind like a shadow. He'd been away so much, focused on growing his business. Could he have missed signs that something was wrong? But why would she? She misses her mother, Loretta said softly. She blames me for replacing her. The psychologist says it's classic attachment disorder. She pulled out her phone, showing him photos of broken toys and torn papers. I've tried so hard to love her like my own, but she won't let me in. Desmond stared at the photos, his chest tight with confusion and worry. Could Beatrice really have done these things? A small noise in the hallway made them both turn. Through the crack under the door, they could see a shadow move away quickly. Later that morning, as Desmond walked past Beatrice's room, he noticed movement inside. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, he could see Beatrice reaching into her wastebasket, pulling out her battered notebook. Her movements were furtive, like a small animal expecting to be startled. "Beatrice?" he called softly. She jumped, the notebook falling from her hands. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, backing away from it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Desmond said, pushing the door open fully. He bent down and picked up the notebook. Why was this in the trash? Beatrice's eyes darted to the door behind him, checking for Loretta. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I'm not supposed to keep it." Desmond opened the notebook, and his heart seemed to stop. Page after page was filled with crayon drawings and carefully printed words. There were pictures of him and Beatrice together, holding hands under bright crayon suns. But what caught his eye were the prayers, written in a child's wobbly handwriting. "Dear God, please bring Daddy home soon. Please make me good, so Daddy will stay. Help me be quiet so she won't be angry. I promise to be better if Daddy comes back." The dates on the pages spanned months, each entry a silent cry for help. Some pages were tear-stained, the ink blurred but still legible. Desmond's hands began to shake as he turned the pages, seeing his daughter's loneliness and fear documented in crayon and tears. He looked up at Beatrice, who stood watching him with wide, anxious eyes. The truth of what had been happening in his home while he was away settled over him like a heavy blanket. His daughter hadn't been throwing tantrums or acting out. She had been surviving. Desmond clutched the notebook tightly, his jaw set. Everything Loretta had just told him in his office shifted into a new, horrible light. The broken toys, the torn papers, they weren't evidence of Beatrice's instability. They were pieces of a carefully constructed lie. Evening shadows crept across the sitting room's elegant furnishings as Desmond paced near the fireplace. The notebook lay open on the coffee table, its pages filled with Beatrice's innocent prayers and drawings. Outside, crickets began their nightly chorus, a gentle backdrop to the tension building within the house. "Loretta?" Desmond's voice carried through the mansion's halls. "Could you join me in the sitting room, please?" Upstairs, Beatrice sat on the carpeted steps, her small hands gripping the wooden banister. Her heart thumped so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She watched through the railings as Loretta's cream-colored dress swished into view below. "Yes, darling?" Loretta's voice held its usual sweetness, but there was an edge to it tonight. Desmond picked up the notebook. "I found something interesting today." His tone was controlled, measured. "Would you care to explain why our daughter's notebook was in the trash?" Loretta's perfectly painted lips tightened. "Oh, that old thing? It was full. I thought she needed a new one. Full of prayers." Desmond opened to a marked page. Prayers asking God to bring her daddy home. Prayers begging to be good enough so she wouldn't be punished. His voice grew harder with each word. Prayers about being locked outside. On the stairs, Beatrice hugged her knees to her chest. She could see Loretta's face changing, the sweet mask slipping. "You can't possibly believe those dramatic scribblings," Loretta said with a dismissive wave. "She's manipulating you, Desmond. Children do that. They create fantasies. Like the fantasy about her attacking you with scissors," Desmond cut in. "Or the supposed tantrums you told me about this morning." Loretta's face flushed. "I have proof. I showed you the photos. Of broken toys you destroyed yourself?" Desmond's voice rose slightly. "Of torn papers you planted? How dare you?" Loretta stepped closer to him, her facade cracking. "After everything I've done for this family, do you know how hard it is to manage this house while you're gone? To deal with a child who hates me?" "She doesn't hate you, Loretta. She fears you." Desmond held up the notebook. "These aren't the words of a violent child. These are the prayers of a terrified one. Of course you'd take her side." Loretta's voice turned shrill. "Your precious little princess can do no wrong. Meanwhile, I'm just the replacement, aren't I? The woman you married to manage your household while you chase business deals." "This isn't about us," Desmond said firmly. "This is about how you've treated my daughter." "Your daughter?" Loretta laughed bitterly. "The one you barely see? The one you left me to raise while you jet around the world? I've given up everything to be here. My career, my independence, all to play mother to a child who isn't even mine." "No one asked you to play mother." Desmond's voice was ice-cold now. "But basic human kindness? That should have been the minimum." A floorboard creaked under Beatrice's feet, and both adults turned toward the staircase. She froze, caught in their gaze, but something in her father's eyes gave her courage. Slowly, she stood up. "Beatrice," Desmond said softly, "come down here, sweetheart." Beatrice descended the stairs one step at a time, her hand trailing along the banister. Loretta's eyes followed her every move, sharp as a hawk's. "Tell your father the truth," Loretta demanded, her voice sugar-sweet again. "Tell him about your tantrums, about how you act when he's away." Beatrice reached the bottom step and looked up at her father. His face was kind, patient. She took a deep breath. "She locks me outside when she's angry," Beatrice said, her voice small but clear. "Sometimes when it's raining, or when it's dark. She says I'm not good enough to be inside." "Lies!" Loretta snapped, but Desmond held up his hand. "Go on, Beatrice." "She throws away my drawings." Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes, and when I try to save them, she tears them up. She says I'm just like Mommy, worthless and gone." Desmond's face darkened with each word. Loretta stepped forward, her hands shaking. "You ungrateful little—" she started, but Desmond moved between them. "Don't you dare," he warned. "Don't you dare threaten her." "Threat?" Loretta's laugh was brittle. "I'm the one being threatened here. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, everything you married me for," Desmond finished. He knelt beside Beatrice, pulling her close. "It was never about family for you, was it? It was about the mansion, the status, the money." Beatrice buried her face in her father's shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. His arms were strong around her, protective. "Listen to me carefully," Desmond said, looking up at Loretta while holding Beatrice. "My daughter will never be mistreated in this house again. Not by you, not by anyone." Loretta stood very still, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. Her eyes moved from father to daughter, then to the grand room around them, all the wealth and comfort she'd schemed to obtain. "Never again," Desmond repeated firmly, pressing a kiss to Beatrice's hair. Loretta's red lips curved into a thin line, her eyes narrowing as she watched them embrace. She said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. The battle lines had been drawn. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the kitchen floor as Desmond flipped pancakes at the stove. Beatrice sat at the counter, her legs swinging beneath her, watching with wide eyes as he added chocolate chips to form a smiley face. "Is that better than plain ones?" he asked, sliding the pancake onto her plate. Beatrice nodded eagerly, her smile matching the one on her breakfast. "Much better, Daddy." From the doorway, Loretta observed the scene, her silk robe pulled tight around her. Her lipstick was perfect despite the early hour, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Don't spoil her too much, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Children need discipline." Desmond's shoulders tensed, but he kept his focus on Beatrice. "Eat up, sweetheart. We don't want to be late for school." Beatrice's fork hesitated mid-bite. "You're taking me?" "Of course." He ruffled her hair gently. "I want to meet your teacher, see your classroom." Loretta's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her coffee cup. "That's really not necessary. I usually handle—" "I know," Desmond cut in firmly, "but things are changing." 20 minutes later, Beatrice bounced down the front steps, her backpack securely fastened, her hand warm in her father's. Desmond helped her into the car, making sure her seatbelt was properly clicked. "Have a wonderful day," Loretta called from the doorway, waving with practiced grace. Several neighbors walking their dogs glanced over, and her smile brightened performatively. The drive to school was filled with Beatrice's quiet chatter about her favorite subjects and friends. Desmond listened intently, his heart aching at how much he'd missed. When they arrived, he walked her right to her classroom door. "I'll be here to pick you up after school," he promised, kneeling to her level. "We can read that new book you mentioned." Beatrice threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "Really? Really?" He hugged her back, not caring who saw. "I love you, sweetheart." "Love you too, Daddy." That evening, after a dinner of mac and cheese, Beatrice's favorite, Desmond sat on the edge of her bed, with The Princess and the Paper Crane open in his lap. Beatrice snuggled under her covers, her teddy bear tucked safely beside her. "Once more?" she asked when he finished, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Tomorrow night," he promised, kissing her forehead. Sweet dreams. The next few days fell into a gentle rhythm. Breakfast together, school drop-offs, afternoon walks in the garden, and bedtime stories. Beatrice's laughter, once so rare, began to fill the house again. She drew pictures of their family, just her and Daddy now, and Desmond proudly displayed them on the refrigerator. But while their small world grew warmer, outside forces were stirring. Loretta maintained her gracious facade, but her activities became more calculated. She hosted afternoon teas with neighborhood ladies, her voice carrying through open windows as she shared concerns about Beatrice's troubling behavior and Desmond's excessive permissiveness. "It's quite worrying," she confided to Mrs. Green over perfectly arranged cucumber sandwiches. "The child barely responds to structure anymore. And Desmond," she sighed dramatically, "he enables her worst impulses." Mrs. Green, known for her active role in the community gossip chain, leaned in eagerly. "How so, dear?" "Just yesterday, she had the most dreadful tantrum at the market." Loretta's voice dripped with false concern. "Throwing things, screaming. And Desmond? He bought her ice cream afterward. Can you imagine?" The fabricated stories spread like ripples in a pond. Soon, sideways glances followed Desmond and Beatrice on their walks. Whispered conversations stopped when they entered shops. One morning, Desmond stopped at his favorite cafe after dropping Beatrice at school. As he waited for his coffee, he couldn't help but overhear two women at a nearby table. "Poor Loretta," one whispered, not quite quietly enough. "Trying so hard to maintain order in that house. I heard the child is completely out of control," the other replied. "Breaking things, having fits. And him? Working so much he doesn't see what's really happening. Or worse, he sees and doesn't care. Just throws money at the problem." Desmond's hands clenched around his coffee cup. The lies twisted his stomach, but it was the casual cruelty toward Beatrice that truly infuriated him. His daughter, his sweet, resilient little girl, painted as some sort of monster. He thought of Beatrice's face that morning, lighting up as she showed him her spelling test with its bright red A+. He remembered her gentle way with the garden flowers, how carefully she turned pages in her books, how softly she sang to herself while coloring. The whispers continued behind him, each word dropping like poison into the community well. Desmond stood straighter, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let Loretta's manipulation destroy what he and Beatrice were rebuilding. Their dignity, their truth, would stand against her lies. He left the cafe without his coffee, already planning his next steps. The time for quiet endurance was over. He would defend his daughter's honor, and his own, with the same determination he'd used to build his business empire. But first, he had a promise. There was a bedtime story waiting to be read, and a little girl's smile that meant more than any whispered judgment ever could. The autumn wind scattered leaves across the driveway as Desmond pulled up to his house. His heart stopped when he saw the government-issued car parked out front. Two women in business attire stood at his doorstep, their expressions professionally neutral, as Loretta spoke to them in hushed tones. "Mr. Harrison?" The taller woman stepped forward as he approached, extending her hand. "I'm Sandra Mills from Child Protective Services. This is my colleague, Rebecca Turner. We're here following up on some concerning reports about your daughter, Beatrice." Desmond's throat tightened. "Concerning reports? Perhaps we could discuss this inside?" Sandra suggested, glancing at the neighbor across the street who had stopped pretending to rake leaves and was openly watching. Loretta ushered them into the sitting room, the perfect picture of a concerned stepmother. "I'll make some tea," she offered, her voice trembling just enough to seem distressed. Once seated, Sandra opened her folder. "Mr. Harrison, we've received multiple reports about Beatrice's emotional state and possible neglect. There are concerns about irregular sleeping patterns, emotional outbursts, and—" she consulted her notes, "instances of her being left unsupervised for extended periods." "That's absolutely false," Desmond said firmly, his hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "I've adjusted my entire schedule to be more present for Beatrice. I take her to school myself, help with homework, read to her every night." "Only recently," Loretta interjected, returning with a tea tray. "After years of being away on business trips, leaving us to manage alone." Her eyes welled with perfectly timed tears. "I've tried so hard to provide structure, but Beatrice has become increasingly difficult to handle." Rebecca Turner made notes while Sandra continued. "We understand you've made recent changes, Mr. Harrison, but the reports suggest these changes might be destabilizing for Beatrice. Sudden shifts in parenting styles can be traumatic for children." "Traumatic?" Desmond's voice rose slightly. "What's traumatic is—" He caught himself, aware that an emotional outburst would only hurt his case. "Please, let me show you something." He retrieved Beatrice's school folder from his study. Inside were her recent assignments, all marked with high grades and positive teacher comments. "This is from just this week. Her attendance is perfect. Her grades are excellent. I have her weekly schedule here. Dance classes on Tuesdays, art on Thursdays. Regular bedtime at 8:30. 3 healthy meals a day." Sandra reviewed the documents while Rebecca took more notes. "This is helpful, Mr. Harrison, but our concerns extend beyond academics. We've received reports of emotional instability, crying fits, refusing to follow rules, even some aggressive behavior." "That's not true." A small voice came from the doorway. Beatrice stood there in her school uniform, her backpack clutched to her chest. The neighbor who usually dropped her off after dance class could be seen pulling away through the window. "Beatrice, sweetheart." Loretta rushed to her, voice syrupy sweet. "These nice ladies are just here to help. Why don't you go upstairs and start your homework?" "No." Beatrice's voice was stronger now. "They're saying things that aren't true. Daddy takes care of me. He makes me feel safe. He—" Beatrice, Sandra interrupted gently. Sometimes adults need to have private conversations. Would you mind giving us a moment? Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes as she looked at her father. Desmond wanted nothing more than to scoop her up and hold her close, but he knew any display of emotion now could be twisted against them. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "Go ahead and start your homework. I'll be up soon to help with math." Beatrice trudged upstairs, her small shoulders slumped. Through the ceiling, they could hear her bedroom door close. "We'll need to schedule a home study," Sandra announced, closing her folder. "And we'll be conducting interviews with Beatrice's teachers, doctors, and other caregivers. In the meantime, we strongly recommend family counseling." "Of course," Loretta agreed, before Desmond could speak. "We only want what's best for Beatrice." After showing the officials out, Desmond turned to confront Loretta, but she had already glided upstairs, leaving him alone with his fury and fear. That evening, after a quiet dinner where Beatrice barely touched her food, Desmond sat on the edge of her bed for their nightly reading ritual. But Beatrice wasn't interested in stories tonight. "Daddy?" Her voice was small in the dim room, her hands clutching her teddy bear. "Are they going to take me away?" "No, sweetheart." He gathered her close, feeling her trembling. "I won't let that happen. I heard them whispering." Tears soaked into his shirt. "They said I'm bad, that you're not taking care of me right. Listen to me." Desmond pulled back to look into her eyes. "You are not bad. You are kind and smart and brave. And I'm taking care of you exactly the way you deserve. With love." Beatrice sniffled, her lower lip quivering. "Please, don't let her take me." "Never." He tucked her in tight, wrapping her in the security of blankets and promises. "I will always protect you." But after kissing her goodnight and turning out the light, Desmond stood in the hallway, doubt gnawing at his insides. Loretta had played her hand well, using his past absences and recent changes against him. The officials' warnings echoed in his mind, mixing with the whispers of neighbors and the tears of his daughter. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of autumn day that painted the world in golden light. Desmond woke early, his mind already racing with plans. He'd marked this day on his calendar, Family Day with Beatrice. In the kitchen, he prepared her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like hearts. The smell of butter and maple syrup drifted upstairs, and soon he heard the patter of small feet on the stairs. "Daddy?" Beatrice appeared in the doorway, still in her pink pajamas with little unicorns, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. Her eyes widened at the sight of the pancakes. "Are those for me?" "All for you, princess." He lifted her onto a kitchen stool. "And guess what? We're going on an adventure today." Beatrice's whole face lit up as she took a big bite of pancake. "Really? Where?" "It's a surprise. But first," he placed her favorite purple backpack on the counter. "We need to get ready for our mission." While they ate, Desmond outlined their day. The park first, then bike riding, followed by a special treat. Beatrice bounced in her seat with excitement, syrup dripping down her chin as she giggled. An hour later, they arrived at Willow Creek Park. The playground sparkled with morning dew, and fallen leaves created a carpet of red and gold. Beatrice ran straight for the swings, her purple jacket fluttering behind her. "Higher, Daddy! Push me higher!" she squealed, as Desmond gave her gentle pushes. Her laughter rang out across the playground, pure and uninhibited. Other parents smiled at the sound, and Desmond felt his heart swell with pride. They spent the morning exploring every corner of the park. Beatrice collected colorful leaves, chased squirrels, and made up stories about the shapes she saw in the clouds. At the monkey bars, Desmond spotted her hesitating. "I'll catch you if you fall," he promised, standing ready beneath them. Beatrice bit her lip, then reached for the first bar. Slowly, carefully, she made her way across. When she reached the end, she jumped into his waiting arms with a triumphant, "I did it!" "You sure did, brave girl." He spun her around, her giggles mixing with his own laughter. After the park, they retrieved their bikes from the car. Beatrice's was a new purple one with training wheels, a gift he'd given her last week. They rode along the bike path that wound through the park, Desmond keeping pace with her careful pedaling. "Look, Daddy!" She pointed excitedly at a family of ducks waddling near the pond. They stopped to watch, and Beatrice named each duckling, creating elaborate backstories for them all. When lunchtime approached, Desmond surprised her with a picnic. They spread a checkered blanket under an old oak tree, unpacking sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes. Beatrice arranged everything with careful precision, making sure their teddy bear guest had his own spot. "This is the best day ever," she declared, biting into her peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The afternoon brought the promised special treat, ice cream at Sweet Dreams Parlor. Beatrice chose strawberry with rainbow sprinkles, while Desmond had chocolate. They sat at a window table, watching people pass by as Beatrice told him about her latest art project at school. "Miss Turner said my drawing was the best in class," she said proudly, ice cream dotting her nose. "She hung it on the special wall." "That's wonderful. Miss Turner seems like a very good teacher." "She is?" Beatrice nodded seriously. "She always listens when I talk, and she gives the best hugs when I'm sad." The next morning at school drop-off, Miss Turner was waiting by the classroom door. As Beatrice skipped inside to hang up her backpack, the teacher pulled Desmond aside. "Mr. Harrison, I wanted to tell you, the change in Beatrice these past few weeks has been remarkable." Miss Turner's warm brown eyes crinkled with genuine happiness. "She's more confident, more engaged. Yesterday in art class, she drew the most beautiful picture of you both at the park." "Thank you," Desmond replied, touched by her observation. "We're working on building new memories together. It shows." Miss Turner glanced at Beatrice, who was now showing her latest drawing to a classmate. "Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. She needs this stability, this joy." Throughout the day, Desmond found himself looking at photos from their Saturday adventure on his phone. Beatrice feeding ducks, Beatrice with ice cream on her nose, Beatrice laughing on the swings, each image captured pure happiness. That evening, after dinner and a bubble bath, Beatrice could barely keep her eyes open during their bedtime story. She drifted off mid-chapter, still wearing her favorite purple pajamas, clutching her teddy bear close. Desmond marked their place in the book and set it aside. He tucked the blankets around her small form, making sure she was cozy and warm. Just before he turned to leave, Beatrice stirred slightly. "I love you, Daddy," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "I love you too, sweetheart," he whispered back, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. As he straightened up, movement caught his eye. Loretta stood in the doorway, her slim figure casting a long shadow across the carpet. Her face was tight with barely concealed jealousy as she watched the tender scene before her. Without a word, she turned and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, leaving Desmond to wonder what new schemes were forming in her mind. The morning light filtered through Desmond's home office window, casting long shadows across his desk. His hands trembled slightly as he held the official-looking envelope that had just arrived. The return address belonged to the county courthouse. His heart sank as he pulled out the papers inside. Legal terms jumped out at him. Motion for emergency custody hearing. Evidence of psychological instability. Pattern of violent behavior. Each phrase felt like a physical blow. Loretta had done it. She'd actually filed legal motions to take Beatrice away. "This can't be happening," he whispered, shuffling through page after page of accusations. According to the documents, he had a history of explosive outbursts and concerning emotional instability. Attached were what appeared to be medical records suggesting he'd sought treatment for anger management. Records he knew were completely fabricated. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Green next door. "Desmond, I'm so sorry. They came to ask questions about you. I tried to be honest, but they twisted everything I said. More messages followed from other neighbors, all variations of the same theme. Loretta had been busy, building her case piece by piece, neighbor by neighbor. She'd spent weeks laying this groundwork while playing the perfect wife in public. The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. A woman in a charcoal gray suit stood on his doorstep, holding a clipboard and wearing an official badge. "Mr. Harrison? I'm Sandra Wells from Child Protective Services. I'm the court-appointed social worker assigned to evaluate your home environment." Desmond's mouth went dry. "Of course, please come in." As they walked through the house, Miss E. Wells took notes on everything: the contents of the refrigerator, the cleanliness of Beatrice's room, the scheduling calendar on the kitchen wall. Her pen scratched endlessly across her notepad. "Daddy?" Beatrice's small voice came from the top of the stairs. She stood there in her school uniform, clutching her backpack and teddy bear. Her eyes darted nervously between Desmond and the stranger. "It's okay, sweetheart," Desmond said, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is Ms. Wells. She's just here to visit for a little while." Ms. Wells spent the next hour interviewing Beatrice alone in her room, while Desmond paced the hallway outside, his stomach in knots. When they emerged, Beatrice's eyes were red-rimmed, and she ran straight into his arms. "Mr. Harrison," Ms. Wells said, her expression unreadable, "I'll need to schedule several more visits, and I'll need copies of all medical records, school reports, and any documentation of your treatment history." "Treatment history?" Desmond's voice cracked. "We have records indicating otherwise." She pulled out copies of the forged documents, multiple incidents of rage-induced episodes, recommended anger management courses. Desmond stared at the papers, his mind racing. They looked real: letterhead, signatures, dates. Loretta must have spent a fortune on forgery. That afternoon, after dropping Beatrice at school, Desmond visited his lawyer's office. Richard Mason, his longtime friend and legal counsel, reviewed the documents with growing concern. "These are good forgeries," Richard admitted, adjusting his glasses. "We can prove they're fake, but it'll take time. Time that Loretta knows we don't have. The emergency hearing is scheduled for next week." "She's thought of everything," Desmond said quietly. "Not everything," Richard tried to reassure him. "We have character witnesses, Beatrice's teacher, your employees. But she's already poisoned the well. You should see how people look at me now, Rick. Like they're wondering if they ever really knew me at all." Back at his office that evening, Desmond sat alone in the darkening room. The sun had set hours ago, leaving only the glow of city lights outside his window. His empire stretched out below him, buildings with his name on them, investments worth millions, all the trappings of success. None of it mattered. He pulled out his phone and looked at the latest photo of Beatrice from their park day. Her smile was so bright, so trusting. The thought of losing her made his chest physically ache. The city lights blurred as he stared out the window, his reflection growing ghostly in the darkened glass. For the first time since finding Beatrice in the rain that night, real fear crept into his heart. What if Loretta's lies were too convincing? What if the courts believed her carefully crafted fiction over the simple truth? The truth that he was just a father who wanted to protect his daughter. But sometimes, he realized with growing dread, the truth wasn't enough. Sometimes lies, if told skillfully enough, could overpower reality itself. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, watching the distant cars move like luminous ants far below. His empire of wealth, built over decades of hard work, suddenly felt hollow. All the money in the world couldn't guarantee he'd keep what mattered most. Somewhere in the city, Loretta was probably celebrating her first victory. The thought of her smug satisfaction made his hands clench into fists. But anger wouldn't help him now. He needed to stay calm, stay focused. For Beatrice. The night grew deeper, and still Desmond stood at the window. the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him like a physical force. Everything he'd built, everything he'd achieved, balanced on the edge of a knife. And Loretta's lies might just be sharp enough to cut it all away. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, but it brought no warmth to Desmond's spirit. He sat at the breakfast table, staring blankly at his untouched eggs and coffee. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from a sleepless night, spent worrying about the custody battle ahead. The scrambled eggs had gone cold, his fork pushing them listlessly around the plate. His shoulders sagged with the weight of defeat, mind still racing through all the ways Loretta's lies could tear his family apart. Tiny footsteps padded into the kitchen. Beatrice appeared in her favorite pink pajamas, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. She studied her father's face with those observant eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Aren't you hungry?" Desmond tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking, sweetheart. Would you like some breakfast?" Instead of answering, Beatrice climbed into his lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. She buried her face against his shoulder, and he could feel her trembling slightly. "I'll be good," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, don't let her take me." The words hit him like a physical blow. They were the same desperate plea she'd made that stormy night when Loretta had locked her out. The same raw fear and vulnerability in her voice cut straight to his heart. Something shifted inside him. The fog of defeat lifted, replaced by crystal clarity. He couldn't give up, not when Beatrice needed him most. His arms tightened around her, protective and fierce. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady and sure. "No one is taking you away. I promise you that." She pulled back to look at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "Really? Really?" He smoothed her hair back from her face. "You don't have to be good to deserve love, sweetheart. You're perfect exactly as you are." Beatrice's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Desmond felt strength flowing back into his spirit. He'd been a fool to let Loretta's schemes make him doubt himself. Still holding Beatrice, he reached for his phone. His first call was to Miss Turner, Beatrice's teacher. "Mr. Harrison," Miss Turner answered warmly. "I've been worried about you both." "I need your help," Desmond said. "Loretta's taking us to court. She's trying to prove I'm an unfit parent." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "That's ridiculous. I've seen such positive changes in Beatrice since you've been more present. She's happier, more confident. Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Of course," Miss Turner said without hesitation. "I keep detailed notes on all my students. I can document exactly when I noticed improvements in Beatrice's behavior and emotional well-being." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you. That means more than you know." His next calls were to his most trusted employees. Many had known him for years, had seen him build his business with integrity and compassion. "Remember that time you needed emergency leave for your mother's surgery?" his office manager Janet recalled. "You not only gave me the time off, but offered to help with medical expenses. That's not the action of an unstable man." One by one, they pledged their support. Each had stories that painted a true picture of his character, stories that could counter Loreta's manufactured evidence. He called Richard Mason back with renewed determination. "Rick, I need you to do whatever it takes to prove those medical records are forged. Check every doctor's office, every signature. There has to be a trail." "Now that's more like it," Richard said, approval clear in his voice. "I'll put my best investigator on it right away." As Desmond made calls and took notes, Beatrice curled up in his lap with her coloring book. The steady scratch of her crayons and her quiet humming grounded him, reminded him what he was fighting for. By mid-morning, he had the beginnings of a strategy: character witnesses, documented proof of his parenting, evidence of Loretta's deception. It was all coming together. He wouldn't just defend against her accusations, he would show the court exactly who she really was. Beatrice had dozed off in his lap, her crayon still clutched loosely in her hand. Her face was peaceful in sleep, trusting completely in his protection. Desmond gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "We'll win this together, sweetheart," he whispered. "I promise." The morning sun had grown stronger, warming the kitchen with golden light. Desmond held his sleeping daughter close, no longer feeling defeated. Sometimes it took a child's simple faith to remind you what really mattered, and what was worth fighting for. Mr. Caldwell's office felt warm and safe, with its rich wooden panels and soft leather chairs. Beatrice sat close to her father, her small hand wrapped tightly in his as they faced the distinguished lawyer across his polished desk. "We need to build an airtight case," Mr. Caldwell explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Every piece of evidence, every witness statement must paint a clear picture of what's been happening in that house." Desmond nodded, his expression determined. "Where do we start?" "With Beatrice's notebook." Mr. Caldwell carefully opened the worn pages, treating them with reverence. "These drawings, these prayers, they tell a story no child should have to write." Beatrice shrunk slightly in her chair, but Desmond squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Your truth is important." Mr. Caldwell's assistant brought in a tray of hot chocolate for Beatrice and coffee for the adults. The familiar comfort of the warm drink helped Beatrice relax as they talked through difficult memories. "Can you tell me about the nights when it was cold?" Mr. Caldwell asked gently. Beatrice's voice came out small but steady. "She would lock the door when Daddy was away. Sometimes I had to sleep in the garden shed." Desmond's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm for Beatrice's sake. The lawyer made careful notes, documenting dates and details. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Green, their elderly neighbor, stood in the doorway, wringing her hands nervously. I need to tell you something," she said, her usual confidence subdued. "I was wrong about Loretta. I see that now." Mr. Caldwell gestured to an empty chair. "Please, come in." Mrs. Green settled herself, glancing apologetically at Beatrice. "I used to think Loretta was just strict, you know? But then I remembered the night I heard crying from your garden. I looked out my window and saw—" She paused, dabbing at her eyes. "Such a small figure huddled by the shed. I should have called someone right then." More neighbors began arriving throughout the morning. The Thompson family from across the street brought security camera footage, showing Beatrice locked outside on multiple occasions. The young couple from next door described hearing Loretta's sharp voice through open windows, berating the child for trivial things. Miss Turner arrived next, carrying a thick folder of documentation. "I've kept detailed records of every concerning interaction," she explained. "The way Beatrice would flinch when anyone raised their voice, how she'd hide her drawings when Loretta came to pick her up, the dramatic change in her demeanor when you started taking her to school yourself, Mr. Harrison." The evidence mounted steadily. Janet from Desmond's office described how Loretta had tried to access company accounts without authorization. The household staff came forward with stories of verbal abuse and manipulation. "She threatened to have me fired when I gave Beatrice an extra cookie," the housekeeper admitted. "Said I was undermining her authority." In the courthouse the next day, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Loretta sat perfectly poised in an expensive suit, her face a mask of practiced innocence. But as witness after witness took the stand, cracks began to show in her composure. Mrs. Green's testimony hit particularly hard. "I watched that woman charm everyone in our neighborhood," she declared firmly. "But now I see it was all an act. No truly caring person treats a child the way she treated Beatrice." Loretta's perfectly manicured nails dug into the arms of her chair. Her lawyer whispered something urgently in her ear, but she shook him off. Miss Turner's professional testimony carried special weight. "In 15 years of teaching, I've learned to recognize signs of emotional abuse," she stated clearly. Beatrice exhibited classic symptoms of a child living in fear. The final blow came from Desmond's accountant, who presented evidence of Lorita's attempts to transfer large sums to private accounts in her name. Lorita's carefully maintained control finally snapped. She shot to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "You're all lying!" she shrieked, causing Beatrice to press closer to her father. "That little brat has everyone fooled with her innocent act. I was the only one trying to instill proper discipline." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel sharply. Loretta's lawyer tried to pull her back into her seat, but she wrenched away from him. "I married into this family," she continued, her voice rising hysterically. "I deserve everything I worked for. That child was just in my way." The mask had crumbled completely, revealing the ugliness beneath. The courthouse crowd murmured in shock as Loretta's true nature displayed itself for all to see. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches. Beatrice sat close to her father, her beloved teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest. The worn, stuffed animal, which had witnessed so many tears and whispered prayers, now served as her anchor in the imposing courtroom. Judge Matthews adjusted his reading glasses, his weathered face serious as he meticulously reviewed the stack of evidence before him. The courtroom remained hushed, the tension almost tangible in the air. Beatrice's small fingers found their way into Desmond's hand, and he gave them a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "Your Honor," Desmond's lawyer said, rising from his seat, "we have one final piece of evidence to present." He approached the bench, carrying Beatrice's notebook, its pages dog-eared and worn from frequent handling. "This notebook belongs to Beatrice Harrison. Inside, you'll find not just a child's drawings, but a documented chronicle of her experiences." The judge accepted the notebook, handling it with care as he opened to the first page. His expression softened slightly as he encountered Beatrice's childish handwriting and colorful drawings. "These entries span the past 8 months," the lawyer explained. "Each one tells its own story." The courtroom fell completely silent as Judge Matthews slowly turned the pages. He paused at a drawing showing a small figure huddled outside a house in the rain, stick figure tears falling from its face. Below it, in wobbly letters, Beatrice had written, "Dear God, please help Daddy come home soon. I promise to be good." Another page revealed a prayer written in purple crayon. "I'm trying to be quiet like she wants. Please don't let her be angry again tonight." Loretta shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. Her lawyer placed a warning hand on her arm, but she shrugged it off with barely contained irritation. Judge Matthews continued through the notebook, his frown deepening with each page. He paused at a particularly detailed drawing showing a family portrait. Beatrice and Desmond holding hands, surrounded by a heart, while a dark figure stood apart, represented by angry black scribbles. The dates on these entries, the judge noted, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom, correspond precisely with Mr. Harrison's business trips abroad. He looked up, his gaze moving between Desmond and Loretta. They paint a very clear picture of what was happening in that household. Beatrice pressed closer to her father, her teddy bear squeezed protectively against her chest. Desmond wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his touch gentle but secure. "Your Honor," Lorita's lawyer began, standing quickly, "these are merely the imaginative scribblings of a child." "These are far more than scribblings, Counselor," Judge Matthews interrupted firmly. "These are contemporaneous recordings of emotional abuse, documented through the eyes of a 7-year-old child. Combined with the testimony we've heard and the evidence presented, they complete a pattern that cannot be ignored." He closed the notebook carefully and placed it on his bench. "I've seen enough." His gavel struck once, the sharp sound making Beatrice jump slightly. "This court finds the allegations against Mrs. Loretta Harrison to be substantiated in full. The evidence of emotional abuse and financial manipulation is overwhelming." Loreta's face drained of color, her carefully maintained composure cracking further with each word from the judge. "Mrs. Harrison," Judge Matthews continued, his voice stern, "you are hereby stripped of all claims to the Harrison household and assets. The prenuptial agreement is upheld in full, and you will vacate the premises within 48 hours. A small gasp rippled through the courtroom. Loretta's hands clenched into fists, her expensive rings glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Furthermore," the judge added, "full custody of Beatrice Harrison is granted to her father, Desmond Harrison, with no visitation rights awarded to Mrs. Harrison." Beatrice's grip on her father's hand tightened. Tears welled in her eyes. But these were different from the fearful ones she'd shed so many times before. She looked up at Desmond, her voice barely a whisper. "We're safe now, Daddy." A gentle wave of applause swept through the courtroom, quickly hushed by the bailiff but carrying all the warmth of justice served. Loretta stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, she gathered her designer purse and strode toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her lawyer hurried after her, clutching scattered papers. Judge Matthews smiled softly at Beatrice, his stern demeanor melting slightly. "Young lady," he said kindly, "would you and your teddy bear like to come up here and bang the gavel to make it official?" Beatrice looked up at her father questioningly. At his encouraging nod, she slipped off the bench and walked shyly to the judge's podium, still clutching her teddy bear. Judge Matthews helped her up onto his chair and placed the gavel in her small hand. "Nice and firm," he instructed gently. Beatrice struck the gavel once, the sound ringing clear and true through the courtroom. A few sniffles could be heard from the gallery as people wiped away tears, touched by the moment of triumph and healing. The spring morning dawned bright and clear, worlds away from that stormy night that felt like a lifetime ago. In the backyard of the Harrison mansion, Beatrice knelt in the soft earth, her small hands carefully holding a pink petunia. Her sundress already had smudges of dirt, but for once there was no sharp voice scolding her about staying clean. "Like this, Daddy?" she asked, looking up at Desmond, who knelt beside her in his casual weekend clothes, just as dirt-stained as hers. "Perfect, sweetheart," he smiled, helping her create a small hole in the rich soil. "These flowers need gentle hands like yours to grow strong." Beatrice's laughter bubbled up like a clear spring as she patted the dirt around the plant's base. The sound carried across the garden, drawing smiles from Mrs. Green next door, who was hanging her laundry and purposely taking longer than necessary just to enjoy the heartwarming scene. "Can we plant the yellow ones next?" Beatrice pointed to the marigolds waiting in their plastic containers. "They look like tiny suns." "Of course we can," Desmond said, reaching for the water can. "But first, let's give this little one a drink. Remember what we learned about new plants? They're like babies," Beatrice recited proudly. "They need lots of love and water to grow big and strong." She watched intently as the water darkened the soil around her newly planted flower. The mansion's gardens, once maintained with military precision under Loretta's direction, were transforming into something more alive, more joyful. Curved flower beds replaced rigid rows, and bright colors bloomed where only proper white roses had been allowed before. The change reflected the transformation inside the house as well. Through the open French doors, warm spring air carried the scent of fresh-baked cookies. Mrs. Peterson, another neighbor who had once believed Loretta's lies, had brought them over that morning as a gesture of continued support. The plates sat on the kitchen counter alongside 3 other welcome gifts from the community: Mrs. Green's legendary apple pie, the Johnson family's homemade bread, and a beautiful hanging plant from Beatrice's teacher. "Daddy, look!" Beatrice exclaimed, pointing at a butterfly that had landed on one of their newly planted flowers. "It's dancing!" Desmond paused in his digging to watch the moment of wonder on his daughter's face. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably another business matter, but he left it untouched. His new assistant had clear instructions. Unless it was truly urgent, all calls could wait until designated work hours. Beatrice's childhood wouldn't wait, and he refused to miss any more of it. "The flowers are already making our garden magical," he said, reaching over to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, leaving a small smudge of dirt on her cheek that made her giggle. The sound of a car door closing drew their attention to the front of the house. Mrs. Green appeared around the corner of the house, carrying a tray of lemonade. "I thought our gardeners might need refreshments," she called out cheerfully. "Mrs. Green!" Beatrice jumped up, remembering at the last second to wipe her dirty hands on the small gardening apron Desmond had bought her before running to hug the older woman. "Careful with the tray, dear," Mrs. Green laughed, setting it down on the nearby patio table. "My goodness, look at all you've planted already. This garden will be the talk of the neighborhood by summer." "We're making it happy again," Beatrice explained seriously, accepting a glass of lemonade with both hands. "The flowers were too scared to laugh before." A shadow of understanding passed between the adults. Mrs. Green had apologized profusely for not seeing through Loretta's deception sooner, but Desmond had assured her that the only thing that mattered was moving forward. "Well, they're certainly laughing now," Mrs. Green said warmly, watching Beatrice skip back to her flower bed. "Just like someone else I know." Desmond nodded gratefully, accepting his own glass of lemonade. The house behind them caught the late morning sun, its windows sparkling. Where it had once felt like a showcase home under Loretta's reign, it was now truly becoming a family home. Toys sometimes littered the living room floor, artwork covered the refrigerator, and the sound of a child's laughter echoed through every room. Beatrice had already returned to her gardening, chattering happily to her flowers as she planted them. She looked up suddenly, catching her father watching her. "Don't worry, Daddy," she said. "I'm being very good with the flowers." Desmond set down his lemonade and walked over to her, kneeling in the dirt beside her small form. "Beatrice," he said softly, turning her gently to face him, "you don't ever have to worry about being good to earn love. Not anymore. Not ever again." He brushed a bit of dirt from her cheek, his heart full as he looked into her trusting eyes. "You are enough, exactly as you are. Whether you're messy or quiet, whether you spill things or plant flowers perfectly, you are always, always enough." Beatrice's lower lip trembled slightly, but her smile was brighter than any flower in their garden. She threw her arms around his neck, not caring about the dirt on her hands or her dress. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered into his shoulder. The sun poured through the mansion's windows, washing away the last memories of that dark and stormy night. In the garden, father and daughter held each other close, their new beginning taking root just like the flowers they'd planted together. I hope you enjoyed that story. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you do not miss out on tomorrow's story. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy.